So as I mentioned before, last week we began our three-part series on Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, this collection of Jesus' teachings that were probably assembled along the way, and now we call it the Sermon on the Mount. This is the stuff. This is the stuff that Jesus cared about. And it's the stuff, as Jesus' followers, that maybe we should care about too. And so this is the biggest collection of the things Jesus cares about, so we should care about too. And last week we talked about how it was radical, and it's still radical today. And we talked about how some modern Christians think that it's weak. And we talked about how it's anything other than weak when you do the right thing instead of follow the crowd blindly like little sheeples. Today, we're moving into this next part of the teaching, and we discover that not only is this teaching radical, but it's revolutionary. Jesus is casting a vision, if you will, for how the world could be, for how the world would be if we were following God's ideal, particularly as put forth in Isaiah chapter 40. And when we think about leaders who have revolutionary ideas for sort of reordering society in a more godly way, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the leader known as Martin Luther King Jr. Some of you maybe were around when he delivered his most famous speech on August the 28th, 1963. I'm so young, I wasn't a part of society at that point. Just a whippersnapper, me. 250,000 people in attendance when King delivered that most famous speech from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. What was the name of that speech? I Have a Dream. And one of the rhetorical techniques that King used in that speech was what's called an anaphora. An anaphora, which is using the same phrase over and over again at the beginning of a sentence. And so in that I have a dream speech, this isn't a trick question. What was the anaphora that King used over and over again? I have a dream. And then he listed what that dream was. And I wish I had King's oratorical skills, but listen to this vision, this reordering of society that King imagined and put forth for the world to hear. He said this: I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. Join me. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racist, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right down in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. He's quoting there from Isaiah chapter 40, where we hear the prophet Isaiah casting a vision for a reordered society. Here's what Isaiah said. Chapter 40, verse 4, every valley shall be lifted up, every mountain and hill made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. And then the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Now, why does King's I have a dream speech remind me of this section of the Sermon on the Mount. It reminds me of Jesus' speech in two ways, both in content and in style. First, by way of content, it's all about reordering society. It's revolutionary. It's casting a vision for a world we don't know yet, but we could. It's aspirational. It reminds me of Jesus' speech through content. It also reminds me of Jesus' speech because it uses an anaphora. Jesus' speech that I read to you a moment ago used an anaphora. Did you catch it? A phrase that Jesus repeated several times at the beginning. What was it? You have heard that it was said. Remember, he said that several times in this speech, and he uses a second one as well. But I say to you. So what is Jesus talking about here when he says, you have heard it said? Think about his audience. It was a first century Jewish audience. They were abiding by the Jewish law, and at that time there were 613 Jewish laws. Why do we have laws? Any lawyers in here that want to admit that? Got some beautiful lawyers in here. We have laws in order to order society. How in the world could we function in a society if we didn't have laws? Now, we don't love all the laws that we have. When I drove here today, from my trip from Palm Harbor down to Clearwater Beach, I counted 752 red lights in that 30-minute trip. Now, I don't love stopping at red lights, but I do. Why? That's how we've ordered our society. That's how we all manage to zoom around in our cars and our SUVs. That's how it works. It wouldn't work without some kind of law. The only other thing that we could think about would be a roundabout. Nobody wants one of those. 613 laws. Jesus is speaking to this first century Jewish audience. Think about their history. Having been slaves in Egypt, abiding under the harsh, dictatorial, cruel, oppressive regime of Pharaoh, and all the laws they had to succumb to as slaves in that society. And they escaped Egypt, and now they're free people. They're out in the wilderness for 40 years, and they're completely free, and yet there's 1 million or so of them, and they've got to figure out how to sort of create their own laws. And so Moses goes up on the mountain. You remember, he goes up on the mountain, and God delivers to Moses what? The 10 Commandments. And then along the way, from the time Moses came down Mount Sinai with those 10 Commandments, the Jews created 603 more laws to add on to that. Jesus is saying, you have heard it said. That's the law, you know it. You know those 613 laws. Good for you, that's great. But friends, that's the bare minimum. That's the bare minimum for how we create a society, a community that it's wonderful to live in. Now, we have this law, go back to the red light. We have to stop at red lights where, bad things happen. But then we can layer on to the red light. Let's say you're pulling up to a red light and there's 100,000 cars behind you, and this poor bloke just got gas. And he just desperately wants to merge into traffic, and you're kind of like, I have the power. I got all the power here driving my big fancy SUV. I don't have to let you in, but what? I can. I can give you a little space so you can merge out. Nobody is demanding that. It's not against the law not to let that guy merge. But it's a layer onto the law. It's you have to stop at the red light, and you can also be kind to that poor bloke who just spent $60 on gas. The laws are the bare minimum. So Jesus isn't, abolishing the law. He says that at the beginning. I have not come to abolish the law, but what? To fulfill the law. It's the law and the layer on. And you know what I want to call this whole section, what that layer amounts to in one word? Kindness. This is all about kindness. And I'm going to explain to you how. Remember in the 90s, there was a political mantra from one of the parties, and it went like this: it's the economy, stupid. Remember that one? Well, with this Sermon on the Mount, I'm going to say it's kindness, stupid. It's just all about kindness. Kindness is Jesus' revolutionary vision for the world. It's that simple. It really is. And so Jesus offers some what sounds to us like harsh teachings, but when we dig into them, we learn it's all about kindness. So let's dig into these point by point. You have heard it said, the anaphora there, but I say to you, let's start with verse 22. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. And then what's the next one? But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And Jesus goes on to talk about insulting people and reconciling. Jesus uses a lot of hyperbole. I love that, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Okay, Jesus. So he's using hyperbole. He's using all these rhetorical devices. And this section, in our translation, he says you will be liable to judgment, but most of the translations say you will be liable to the fire of hell. Let's talk about what that means for a second in this text. Outside of Jerusalem, there was this place called Gehenna. Everybody say that with me. Gehenna. And it was this nasty, despicable place outside of the southwest of Jerusalem where they kept a fire burning 24/7. And the big city of Jerusalem, all the residents would go out to Gehenna and burn their trash. So Jesus is using this Gehenna as a metaphor for those who do not display this kind of kindness. So the law says, don't murder. How many of you have murdered? Okay, all right, just never know. Don't murder. That's the law. That's what? It's the bare minimum. Jesus says, you layer on top of that and just be nice. Refrain from calling people names. Resolve the conflicts. Reconcile with your brother and sister. Yes, do the bare minimum. Don't murder, but also get along with each other. And this teaching, it's revolutionary. You see, kindness is Jesus' revolutionary vision for the world. Let's go on. Verse 27. Help me out here with this anaphora. Ready? You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. Then the next one. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. I'm not going to do a show of hands here. Just keep that one to ourselves. But I want you to keep in mind that adultery meant something a little different than we think about it now. We tend to think of adultery as any kind of sexual relationship outside of the bonds of marriage. But I want you to think in terms of in the first century Jewish world. Any married man in Jesus' day could have had a relationship with an unmarried woman, and it wouldn't be considered adultery. Why? Why is that? Women were property. And so long as a man was not taking another man's property, a woman was fair game. That was the letter of the law. That was bare minimum. Kindness, in Jesus' vision for the world, honors women. Kindness does not objectify women. Kindness means treating all people as human beings in a shared common humanity. And so this teaching, I think, was primarily for the men in Jesus' day because men held all the power. This teaching today is for women, men, anybody who holds power over another. Do not dehumanize another human being, period. This teaching is revolutionary. Kindness is Jesus' revolutionary vision for the world. All right, how you doing? You okay? All right, we got through that one. Let's do the next one. It's fun too. Verse 31. You have heard that it was said. Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, this one's tricky, but it's also about kindness, particularly kindness to those who have no power. Again, women were property. A divorced woman would probably be left impoverished, destitute. A lot of divorced women in the day turned to prostitution. Then you had unwanted children. A certificate of divorce was the very bare minimum that would have left women and children destitute. The kingdom of God requires more than that, to honor those who have no power. This teaching is revolutionary, friends. Kindness is Jesus' revolutionary vision for the world. Verse 33, we're going to keep going with these tricky teachings of Jesus. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows that you have made to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all. Now, we've reduced this to cuss words. Anybody ever said a cuss word? We won't do that one either. This isn't about cuss words. This is about making promises you can't keep. This is about being a person of integrity, doing what you say you're going to do, promising little and delivering much. Far more than the bare minimum. This is kindness, and kindness is Jesus' revolutionary vision for the world. Here's the last one we're going to tackle today, verse 38. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer, but if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. Now, it goes on to say, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go the second. They are living at this time under Roman occupation. Remember that, right? And so in that day, in the social hierarchy, anyone with power could come up to anybody lower than them and backhand them. It was perfectly legal to do so in the hierarchy. And so Roman soldiers would, go around and backhand somebody. But if you turned the other cheek, that's inviting another strike, but this strike would be as equals. In the hierarchy, you could be backhanded by a soldier, but if a soldier then punched you outright, that's equals. And so this isn't some meek, mealy-mouthed way to just be like, okay. This is standing up in nonviolent resistance. Offering yourself as an equal to one who has tried to diminish you. How is this kindness? It's kindness in that it's not violent. Someone hits you on the right cheek, turn the other. This is all about power dynamics. Jesus' revolutionary teaching here is kindness. Kindness is Jesus' revolutionary vision for the world. But here's the thing. Jesus is still waiting for us to catch this revolutionary vision. Jesus is still waiting for us to catch a revolutionary vision of showing kindness that goes beyond the bare minimum. Jesus is still waiting for us to catch this revolutionary vision of a society where we treat people as equals and fully human rather than objects. Jesus is waiting for us to catch a revolutionary vision in which the valleys are lifted up and the mountains are made low. True equality for all of God's children. Jesus is waiting for us to catch a revolutionary vision of love that transforms enemies into neighbors and strangers into family. Jesus is waiting for us to catch a revolutionary vision of heaven right here on earth. See, I can do an anaphora too. 2,000 years later, we're still trying to figure out how to live beyond the bare minimum. We live in a time where anger dominates our discord. Anybody disagree with me on that? We live in a time when people are reduced to objects. We live in a time when the powerful exploit the powerless. We live in a time when we're not sure how it's all going to work out. But what if, friends? What if we, right here, right now, what if we begin to catch Jesus' revolutionary vision? What if we stopped settling for the bare minimum and lived our lives with a radical kindness that makes others go, they're different? So here's a challenge this week. I want you to think about one area in your life where you've been doing the bare minimum. And ask, what would kindness look like here? Maybe it's in your marriage, choosing kindness over being right. Maybe it's in the workplace where you see your colleagues as fellow humans instead of obstacles to a goal. Maybe it's when you're in traffic, leaving space for that poor bloke trying to merge. Maybe it's in some other conflict where you choose reconciliation over retaliation. We need to start small, but we need to start revolutionary. The world is still waiting for the Christians of the world to show them how to do it. And so if we can do that, we can begin to create our own little version of heaven right here on earth. Will you join me?